Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
I'm Sylvia Earle, National Geographic explorer, founder of Mission Blue, oceanographer, and an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for hosting this time together about little shrimpy things.
Our ocean conversations continue. Yes. And this is our show, Dive In, where you host these informal and open conversations with the broad ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. We're glad to be back, and we hope everyone has made some time to get outdoors. And happy Pie Day today.
Yes, I'll explain that. Pie. Cherry, apple, peach, blueberry?
No.
Well, what?
Just March 14th, 314.
Oh. Okay, Pie Day.
Pie Day, yeah.
Like it.
So
Pretty dirty.
that's what we do. As we get through today's conversation, we encourage you to put your questions into the Q&A box. And later on, we're going to answer
answers there too, if you want.
We'll get as many answers as we can. I'm going to start to share my screen with any luck whatsoever. Hooray.
Cool. Yay. I love this picture.
Yes, and as we get ready to go here, we want to remind everyone that
the world is
blue. And this is the great blue back of the planet, as we like to say.
I think it's the front, it's the face.
I think it's the big blue shoulders holding us all up.
Whatever it is, it keeps us alive. So thank you.
It certainly does. And today we're going to be talking about krill, and we're super excited to be inviting Dr. Kim Bernard. Can you turn on your camera and microphone, please? There she is.
Hi, everyone.
We're so happy to have you here with us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So Kim's an associate professor of ocean ecology and biogeochemistry at Oregon State University. And
that's a great biogeochemistry, is that right?
It is.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
That's really the thing that people need to understand, that Earth is a biogeochemical miracle.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you.
With the emphasis on the bio, there are plenty of places in the universe with lots of
Geo.
Yes. Yes.
And chemical.
But where is the life? It's here.
Yeah. That's what makes it so magic. You're right.
And you're really passionate about understanding the climate and the changes in climate that's really having on Arctic or Antarctic and sub-Antarctic marine ecosystems. And you've gone all around the world looking at krill, but really what compelled you? What's the thrill of it?
Oh, I love that. Well, I have this slide here. This is actually me from many years ago now, actually over 20 years ago. And it was on my first research cruise to the sub-Antarctic. So if I sort of back up a little bit, I'm from South Africa originally. I grew up there, I was born and raised there. And when I was about 13, I was extremely passionate about the oceans, actually throughout my childhood. But I think it was when I was about 13 is when I decided to become a marine biologist. And I loved dolphins and whales and everything about the ocean. I didn't really know what krill were at the time. And then soon after that, probably around the same age, I started hearing about Antarctica and the sort of frozen continent and these explorers that would go down there. And the explorers I would hear about were always men. But I didn't seem to think that would stop me at all. So I then became really determined that my career was going to be as an Antarctic marine biologist. So from that very young age. And so I ended up going to university in South Africa. And I worked with a professor who did Southern Ocean research. He worked on sub-Antarctic zooplankton. And so I got to go on these cruises, and I went on, I think it was 5 research cruises on the S.A. Agulhas, which is pictured there in the lower right hand, down to the sub-Antarctic island of Marion Island, part of the Prince Edward Archipelago. South Africa is one of the South African territories. And I was hooked. After that, I kept going back every year. And once I got my PhD, after a couple of years of doing some coastal work for South Africa, I returned to the Antarctic through a postdoc in the US. And so these pictures, I mean, you can see the joy. I was enamored. I loved it so much. And yeah, it brings back such great memories actually just looking at it. But so that got me into zooplankton research, working with Debbie Steinberg, who's a professor in the US at Virginia Institute of Marine Science. I did my postdoc with her, and she is part of the Palmer Antarctica long-term ecological research project. And so for three, I think I did 2 of their research cruises in January, back in 2010 and 2011, and I did 2 summer field seasons at Palmer Station with them. And that's where I started working with krill, Antarctic krill. And yeah, the rest is kind of history.
Oh, that's awesome.
They're actually kind of cute with those big black eyes.
And they have
They are.
like a huge range too. You know,
Absolutely.
So there's just one order and 2 families, and how many species?
I think it's something like, I think it's something like 86. I probably have that number wrong because I didn't write that down, but it's something on that order. And this map actually, an honors student, one of the undergrads working in my lab doing research with me, she produced this map for us for World Krill Day last year. And it only has, 12 different species on there. And there's obviously a lot more, but you can see from their coverage that they really are everywhere and they're incredibly important. And I love this drawing or painting by Miguel Alcaraz from 1986. I think that's just such a classic painting of krill. And then the photograph on the bottom, that is the largest krill on the planet, at least that we know of. And it's called Thyssinopoda spinnicordata. And I believe it can get up to like a foot long.
Really?
I always thought that Antarctic krill was the biggest, and I actually used to tell people that. But I didn't know until I realized that there was something that large. And it's a really deep sea living krill species. So you very rarely see it. I don't think it's being caught more than a handful of times, but yeah, it's quite a monster.
Yeah. And they go down, I mean, I've read that they can go down to about 4,000 meters.
Oh yes. Yeah, they can be up in the surface layers all the way down to the deep sea. Antarctic krill actually, so some of these species will only live in the deep sea and others only in the surface, but Antarctic krill has been seen at about 1,000 meters depth on submersibles, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And then so they're pole to pole at the tropics. They're literally everywhere. Yeah.
So this is going to be this is kind of a loud little video, but we're going to watch it.
You can turn the sound on.
All your fault. This is very.
Explain this.
These are some merry krill.
I like putting krill to music.
There we go. There they went.
There they went, yes. Yep, so those were Antarctic krill. This photograph over here is also a still Antarctic krill. The krill that was shown in the last video, they were collected for a different group, not my group actually, but they arrived at Palmer Station last year. Well, I suppose I should add this part. So I spent the whole Antarctic winter at Palmer Station, which is on the Antarctic Peninsula, last year as part of an early career grant from the National Science Foundation. And it was me and some of the students in my lab. And we were working on juvenile Antarctic krill and how they survive the wintertime when food is really scarce. And we were also specifically looking at how different food types affect their health, like their physiology and their body condition through the winter. And so our krill were much smaller than those ones, an average of about 25 millimeters. So, really quite small. Those krill were all adults. They were collected towards the end of winter by a new crew who were coming to station to spend the summer at Palmer. And they were studying adult krill during the summertime. But they made a much better video than our juveniles did.
It's remarkable that you actually were able to overwinter in Antarctica. The first people to do so were, I believe, 1955. And in fact,
Yeah,
it was not even discovered until 1820.
I know,
And
it's pretty crazy.
it used to be such a big deal, and it is still kind of a big deal to get to the Antarctic continent, let alone to mess around in the waters surrounding the continent
Mhm.
and study the creatures who live under the ice. So much more has been done about those creatures that come to the surface or go in and out of the water, penguins,
Yeah.
sea lions, seals, and of course, some of the other seabirds that dive, the cormorants and the like. But for humans, I mean, this is it's remarkable.
It truly is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scientists used to have to give up their appendix and their wisdom teeth in order to go, right?
I don't have my wisdom teeth, but I still have my appendix.
Very good.
I'm going to overwinter again this year, and I leave in early May, so hopefully my appendix is still going to be okay. But
When-
yeah, it's
When do you come back? You leave
late
in-
October, end of October.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a commitment. That's great.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful experience. This is just another photograph of krill. And I guess what I'd like to point out here is, well, apart from just how beautiful and cool they are and those massive eyes that they have, you can see, I guess, oh, I don't know if I can point with my arrow, probably not.
Probably not.
You can see just behind its eye, there's that really green sort of section. The big round green section that sort of extends, I guess, a quarter of the way back. That is the hepatic pancreas, but then the gut is just behind the eye. It is a darker green. And they're both green because this particular krill has been eating phytoplankton, which are a really important part of their diet. In particular, the type of phytoplankton that they like are called diatoms. So those are larger phytoplankton species. And Antarctic krill are omnivorous. They feed on diatoms, but then when diatoms aren't abundant, they'll feed on other smaller zooplankton. So things like copepods, and even microzooplankton, dinoflagellates, and so on. And depending on what they're
snails, the
sorry,
pteropods, the pteropods,
yes,
swimming snails.
yes, exactly, yeah. So they really are truly omnivorous, and for a long time, I think researchers thought that Antarctic krill were primarily herbivorous or predominantly herbivorous. And one of the reasons why we're studying how juvenile krill, or how the diet of juvenile krill affects their physiology in the winter, is because the food available to them is changing at the Antarctic Peninsula due to warming. So warming along that region has resulted in a decrease in diatoms and an increase in things like copepods. And so we're trying to look at how that shift is going to affect their ability to survive.
The real key is the role of krill and copepods and the other small zooplankton is that whales and the bigger creatures can't eat diatoms. They just
Exactly.
they need something in the middle. They can eat diatoms that then passes the energy up to the big guys.
Absolutely. And I think I have a food web slide coming up, but I guess while this one's up here, I'll touch on the reason I put this slide in is because I think it's important to recognize that people have been studying Antarctic krill for over 100 years now, since the discovery voyages, and that's incredible, but there's still so much that we don't know about them. So yeah, I think that,
oh, here we go.
Yes, this is a beautiful, a beautiful piece of artwork produced by National Geographic. And they did let me use it for a previous talk, and I hope that they are still okay with me using it for this presentation. But you know what I really love about this is how well it shows the central role of krill in this ecosystem. And it even, unfortunately, includes the fishing vessels that you can see there, which we'll get to later, I think. But you can see that in Antarctica, Antarctic krill is the primary food source for so many top predators. So the humpback whales, the blue whales, minke whales feed on them. Numerous types of penguins, but especially the picosellid penguins, like the gentoo, the adelie, and the chinstrap, they all feed on them. all the different seals, well, not all of the seals, but crab eater seals. They're actually called crab eaters because I guess the early sealers opened their stomachs up and saw this red and thought it was crab, but actually it was krill. Fur seals, definitely.
Crabs are rare in Antarctica, but
they are, yes, they are. So and then, you know, even leopard seals feed on Antarctic krill, which to me is mind-blowing. This is apex predator that feeds on Antarctic krill. And then of course there's the fish and seabirds and squid, and if an animal doesn't feed on Antarctic krill, and I mean a large animal, it feeds on something else that does feed directly. And some of these animals feed only on Antarctic krill, which, you know, so they are absolutely critical.
so the only thing missing in this beautiful image is the green stuff. I guess it's kind of
That's
there.
true. That's actually a good point.
That's the powerhouse. That's what makes the krill possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
No green, no
Guys.
krill.
Yeah.
And no green, no oxygen for us too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually, this is a stylized diagram that I made for representing the food web, but essentially what I was just covering now, and then what Sylvia brought in is the green stuff up in the top left there, which is I've included all plankton in that. So there's, if you look at the zoomed in little circle, there are different diatoms in green and then some copepods in the sort of pink color, and those are both really important prey for krill.
And on top of all of these, the human consumers have moved in on the squid. I mean, first, the first explorers in Antarctica took the seals, quantities, and next the penguins, and then the whales. Now they've moved on to the krill and the fish. I mean, when are we going to learn?
Well, you know, hearing that argument that, you know, we'd taken so many whales that there were excess krill there to be had.
Yeah.
Which was just
that's an excuse. It's
wacky.
No science behind that at all.
As you often say, there's no excess in nature.
No.
So
that's right. No waste either.
No waste, no.
Oh, there's
the green again.
Oh, I like it.
Yes. So this is a really great figure that comes from a paper by Cavan and colleagues in 2019. And I like to include it because it shows the role that krill play in the biogeochemical cycles, in particular the carbon pump. And so, I mean, I guess I could try and break down what's happening here, although it is difficult because I'm going to be pointing at my screen and none of you can see what I'm pointing at. But you can see, so essentially the phytoplankton, the plants of the ocean, up in the surface waters where there's light and nutrients, they take up the carbon dioxide. So you can see the carbon dioxide sort of coming into the ocean as the phytoplankton take it up. Antarctic krill then eat the phytoplankton, consuming that carbon. Then there's different ways that carbon can leave them and either go back into the surface ocean or go down to the deep sea. And so let's see, we look at a couple of them at the box that's circled with the number 4. You'll see that there's a sort of a faint image, like a ghost of krill just above that krill. That's the molt. Right. And so krill molt quite frequently. And I think it's on the order of sort of, I want to say 5 to 60, every 5 to 60 days or so, depending on a lot of different factors in the summertime. So they really do molt quite a lot, unlike a lot of other crustaceans. And every time they molt, that molt's, you know, it has carbon in it, and it'll sink down to the seafloor and take that carbon with it. Around that sort of area, the 1, 3, and 4, there's these little brown strings. Those are krill fecal pellets. So krill poop actually plays a huge role in the global carbon cycle, and it's been estimated. I'm trying to make sure I get the numbers close, but I think the Pew Charitable Trust have a great estimate, and it's something on the order of the amount of carbon that krill transfer to the sea floor, to the deep sea, through fecal pellets, through their poop, is equivalent to each year, is equivalent to the amount of carbon dioxide produced by 35 million cars each year. Wow. So it's huge. They really are important. And then they also undergo what we call diel vertical migration. So every day on a daily cycle, they swim from the surface waters all the way down to the deep sea, where it's dark, and then sometimes as deep as 1,000 meters. And when they're down there, they could be pooping down there. And sorry, maybe I don't know if I should be using official terminology. defecating, and then also respiring, so breathing out the carbon dioxide. And so they're removing that carbon around the ocean, and a lot of it's getting into the really the deep sea, where it'll be sequestered for many, many years, hundreds to thousands of years.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think this
And
is
really just the motion of them kind of circling deep to surface and back and forth can really be mixing the water as well.
One krill times a million.
Yes,
Yeah, so the bigger the tool,
Yeah.
the more effective.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And another key factor that I know you're not overlooking it, but it gets overlooked, is that every single krill gives nutrients back that power the phytoplankton.
Yes.
Much of it does sink to the bottom, but enough of it stays actually where the phytoplankton can utilize it.
Absolutely.
Whales do the same thing. Whales poop.
Yes.
On a big scale.
Very big scale.
But lots of them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that there's been some great studies on how whale poop introduces iron into the surface waters in the Southern Ocean. And in the Southern Ocean, phytoplankton are largely, like, their productivity is largely limited by iron availability. So, I mean, whales are incredibly important in that regard. And the reason they're doing is that because they're eating krill. So, yeah. And then sorry, go for it.
And you wonder, with the change in the phytoplankton, you can make a direct connection to changing temperature, but also the acidification issue. And there's a change in chemistry because so much life has been removed. When you take thousands of tons of krill, you change the chemistry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so there have been quite a few studies on the effects of ocean acidification in the Southern Ocean in general and on Antarctic krill. And what we're seeing so far is that some of them there are some studies that show there isn't really a negative effect, and others that show that there really is. And I think a lot more research needs to be done on that. There are some intricacies in doing these ocean acidification experiments and controlling them in a way that is meaningful. But most certainly, and what you're saying about removing such large numbers of krill, I think that actually in that Cavan paper talks about this too, is that, these are, I don't like necessarily to use the term geoengineers, but they are taking the carbon out of the surface waters and playing a big role in that. And so without them, there's definitely going to be more.
And this shows us sort of the distribution patterns over a good chunk of time, like from 1962 to 2008.
Yes. This figure, I like this one because it shows just broadly where most of the Antarctic krill are. So they exist around the entire continent of Antarctica, but you can see that in the we call this the Southwest Atlantic sector. So where you're seeing that red and orange, it is, I wish I could use an arrow, sorry. That would be so good. That there's south. Could you point to South Georgia?
I don't know if we can or not. I don't know if it can show to people here.
And it'll let me do something. Oh yeah.
Here's the red and the orange.
Yes, that's perfect. Yeah. Yes. Oh wait, you know what? I think. Oh wait, no, never mind. That's not mine. Okay, sorry. I thought I had an idea. But yes, so there's South Georgia. You can see there's a lot of krill up there. That's the Scotia Sea, and then along the Antarctic Peninsula as well. So it's sort of like from the western Antarctic Peninsula all the way up into the Scotia Sea. That's really this important area for Antarctic krill. So over 50% of the circumpolar krill population is found there. And that is also where warming is happening the fastest and where the fishery is focused.
Yeah.
Double whammy.
And then you've got this series of slides that I can go through them as quickly or as slowly as you like, but.
Yeah, so this is a relatively recent study, as you can see, 2019, and they used data from as early as 1926. And there was a sort of a gap in the data series, but they essentially looked at, it's a massive data set combined from, researchers from all over the world actually who are studying krill, Antarctic krill in this region. And it shows this like a southward contraction of the population. So you can see in this period, oh, sorry, if you go back one, you can see in that period, the 1926 to 1939, the center of the population was just south of South Georgia, where that blue arcing line is. But you can see that, and that's sort of the center weighted sort of average where it was. But you can see the huge densities around South Georgia. And also, if I point out on the figure, the bar graph on the right, the krill density goes up to 200. So take note of that. And then we go to the next one. And so you can see there's a sort of not quite a huge shift yet in where the center of the population is. There's a lot more along the Antarctic Peninsula, and I have a feeling it's because in those early, like the 1920s or 30s, I don't think there was a lot of krill research along the Antarctic Peninsula. So I kind of like to compare this one to the next one. And if you look, before we go to the next, oh, sorry. Again, the krill density on the bar graph goes up to 300. Okay, so now we can go to the next one. And so now you can see that that arcing blue line has dropped south. So that means that the center of the population, where it is kind of moved further south. And if you look at that figure, it only goes up to 50, rather than 300. So that the population itself has declined between those two periods of time, and the center of the population has shifted south. And that is, the idea is that is largely due to warming. So and this is the warming that I'm talking of. This is winter air temperature data, and it comes from, it was the Faraday station on the Antarctic Peninsula. It's now the Vernadsky station. And you can see, that orange, it's not an orange, purple line that goes straight through the blue up and down lines. That's the trend line. And that shows a very clear upward trend. And it's essentially I think it's a 1 degree C increase in air temperature per decade. So it's a really big increase. Yeah.
Very steep.
And the big push to start taking large quantities of krill and little squid, but focusing on the krill in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And part of the justification was, well, the whales are gone. There must be an excess.
Yeah,
we will fix it. We will take.
Oh yeah, we'll take them because we'll be doing the right thing. Yeah.
We don't want to waste this krill.
No, they couldn't have been put there for something else.
Yeah. So I was reading they had the first
shred of science behind that.
Right, but I think the first commercial fishing started kind of experimentally as early as the 1960s, right? There were some Russian fisheries that started then, and then it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah, I have a fishery slide that we can
go get to that one.
But I guess before we get there, this one just showing the changes in sea ice as well. So I'm sort of trying to highlight what's happening at the Antarctic Peninsula and the Scotia Sea, which is where we know all the krill, like the majority of the krill are, that the air temperatures are warming. And then this figure the figure rather than the photograph, that shows changes or the anomaly of sea ice duration in days per year between 1979 and 2011. And the red color means shorter sea ice season and the blue means longer. And you can see in the sort of southern section of the Western Antarctic Peninsula and into the Bellingshausen Sea, you can see that dark red. So it is 4 days shorter per year, which over 10 years is more than a month. And if you think about the Antarctic winter, it's, you have 6 months. So if you're losing that much sea ice for the annual sea ice season, it's significant. And Antarctic krill really do depend on sea ice in a lot of ways.
So the penguins.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
This is a robust looking krill here.
She's very pregnant. Yeah, so that's a very gravid female krill. Underneath her carapace are just all the eggs that she's going to be releasing quite soon. And then on the left-hand side is just a diagram of the krill life cycle, and it's really quite impressive what these little animals do. And the females will lay their eggs, and it's long been understood that they have to lay their eggs over really deep waters, so like 800 meters or so. because of the cold temperatures there, it takes at least 5 days for the eggs to mature to hatch. And if they lay them over shallower waters, the sinking rates of the eggs mean that they will hit the sea floor before they hatch. And, presumably that's not ideal.
Right.
We're actually working on something now that suggests that they might be able to lay the eggs over shallow water, but we've still got a lot of work to do on that. But yeah, the eggs hatch, and then they basically undertake this massive swim up 800 meters, gradually developing through these different life stages. And by the time, and this all happens in the summer, and by the time they are Facilia, that little blue guy at the top, there's 6 different Facilia stages. That's when they're starting, it's sort of, the fall is coming in, and they actually have to overwinter for their first time still as larvae. So the Facilia is also a larval stage. And then once they've survived the winter, they will become juveniles and enter the population as juvenile post-larval krill. So their first winter of their whole life cycle is really critical to the recruitment and to the whole population's success.
How long before they actually mature to be able to be moms and dads?
Oh, that's a great question. So for females, they can sexually reproduce after about 2 years, but sometimes it's 3, and males it's generally 3. And this is a really good point. I'm glad you asked this, because I don't think it's obvious to everyone, and I forgot to mention, but Antarctic krill live for 5 to 7 years.
Wow.
So they, which is actually astounding for a small invertebrate.
Small
like this.
animal, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for a crustacean. And so yeah, they become sexually reproductive at the age of 2 at the minimum.
And I'm wondering if do they require some kind of pressure change? Does that kind of trigger the hatching of the egg since they sink down to like 800 meters?
No, I don't think so, because you can get them to hatch in the laboratory. So I think it's just sort of a developmental thing. And once they've reached the right stage, then they'll pop out and start swimming up.
That's awesome. When you think about it, chickens mature in less than 1 year and
Yes.
start.
Yes.
Chickens, and these little
Exactly.
birds take at least 2 to get to the point where they can start to reproduce. I had heard that they might live as long as 12 to 15 years.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard that.
The bigger ones.
Yeah.
And I think I think in captivity there have been some that have lived long, and perhaps that's the sort of order of number of years that they've been living. Yeah.
How do you tag?
How do you tag a krill?
I wish I did know.
You have to get that great big krill,
Yes. Yeah, the massive odor.
Oh, here they are under the ice.
Yeah. So this is a really great photograph taken by Ulrich Freyer from the Alfred Wegener Institute on a winter research cruise that the Germans did several years back. And they were looking at the importance of sea ice in the Weddell Sea on larval krill survival and health. And so you can just really see, for one, I like this image because it shows the sort of nooks and crannies under the sea ice. And those are great areas for larval krill to hide from predators. There's a lot of predators of larval krill too. Obviously the adults are good prey for things like penguins and seals and whales, but the larvae will get eaten by larger zooplankton and fish, and then also things like ctenophores, the various gelatinous zooplankton. So hiding in those little cracks is really beneficial for them. And a study by Bettina Meyer from Germany also found that it was really important for them to survive. This ice you can see isn't green. In the Weddell Sea, the sea ice is really thick, and so there isn't a lot of ice algae available for the krill. But in other parts like the Antarctic Peninsula, if you're driving a ship through, well, you probably wouldn't be driving, unless you're a captain. But anyway, if you're on a ship that's going through sea ice, as the sea ice cracks, and I'm sure Sylvia, you've seen this down in Antarctica too, but it cracks and it sort of tips over, and you can see the underside of the sea ice is just brown, and that's all phytoplankton. We call it ice algae when it's in that stage, but that's all really good food for krill. And there have been several studies that have shown that Antarctic krill, the juveniles and the larvae, will feed on that in the wintertime. And so I guess I should back up a little bit too. The wintertime, we know there's not a lot of food available to krill. The larvae well, the adults have fats that they store. They eat a lot in the summer, they store the fats, and they use those to survive the winter. The larvae don't have those fats, so they really do need to eat. And if they can't find food, then potentially they will die and not make it. So the sea ice provides concentrated food because it's really right there, and then also shelter. And so it's really important.
So that's where the oil in krill comes from. They eat it. They don't make the so-called krill oil.
No, that's the thing. They get it from phytoplankton.
So why not grow the phytoplankton instead of killing krill for those? Come on.
This is exactly, Sylvia, I totally agree. I feel like we as humans have put a man on the moon, and soon we'll be putting women on the moon too, which I think is awesome. And we can't figure out how to, I'm surely we can figure out how to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What have we got happening here?
So this is just a map, obviously, of Antarctica, and then these red boxes are the Kamla fishing grounds. So, or I guess the management areas they call them. And Kamla is the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, and it's an international body that is essentially responsible for managing the krill fishery and any other resources in the Southern Ocean. And so these little blocks are areas where historically fishing has occurred. Krill fishing at the moment, as far as I know, isn't occurring in Area 48, so in East Antarctica, but where it's really concentrated is Area 48. So 48.1, 48.2, 0.3, and 0.4. And again, you can see that that's around right in the Scotia Sea and then along the Antarctic Peninsula, which is the area that's changing.
I think people should be asking, why is fishing taking place in the waters around Antarctica at all? It's a global commons. It's a part of the high seas.
I mean, the land part is really heavily protected.
Yeah, by international agreement that came about during the height of the Cold War. Remarkable. There's no commercial or military activity on the continent, but the waters, a small number of nations are disproportionately taking large quantities of wildlife, krill, the squid, and deep sea fish. And everybody pays the cost. And as you point out, there's a climate connection here. And why it is allowed at all, based on what we now know, it's one thing based on the knowledge in the 1980s. We made some mistakes, but there's still time. With a new high seas framework, a treaty in the works to protect the high seas, why not protect all of the waters around Antarctica? Who's going to suffer? A small number of highly subsidized fishing fleets. Everybody will win, especially the planet.
I totally agree. I think, also a large number, a lot of the increase in the fishing effort that we've seen in recent years, and you can see in this figure, which I'll talk about in a sec, but a lot of it's really stimulated by the krill oil supplement industry now. Krill are harvested for a number of different reasons, and as feed for agriculture, aquaculture, you name it, as a food source, but also really recently, and it's becoming very prominent, is as a supplement, so as a health supplement. And it's the EPA and DHA omega fatty acids that, and as Sylvia mentioned, that krill don't synthesize those themselves. I actually listened to a great master's defense this morning where the student was talking about these fatty acids in algae, and they don't. It comes from the algae that they eat, the diatoms, the phytoplankton.
It's the same with the fish oil, like the menhaden. They don't,
and squid.
None of them just somehow miraculously produce oil.
No, exactly. If you can go back one, I can actually quickly touch on that. Sorry, unless I did tell you that I talk a lot. So if you need to say leopard seal, then this is data from CAMLA, the commission I just mentioned, and it's the catching times, and you can see that first peak in catch in the early, sort of from the early 1980s to 1992. That was dominated by the then USSR. It was subsidized fishing. And then at the end of the Cold War, it all crashed down. And then it sort of was quite slow in the uptake, but recently it is really started ramping up. And The most recent data I have here for 2020, but you can see that that end bar is actually already higher than any of the previous maximums. And so it really is ramping up.
Incredible.
Scaling down, which is where it really needs to be.
Yeah. So the reason I put this photograph and the next photograph, or not photograph, sorry, image in, is because these are, so there's a number of different fishing vessels that operate for krill. This is the Saga Sea, which is one of the Norwegian ones. And then there's if you go on to the next slide, I guess that's quite zoomed in. I didn't realize it did that. This is the Antarctic Endurance, which is another one of them. And last year in May, it was May, early May, my team and I were on board the Nathaniel B. Palmer, which is one of the US Antarctic research vessels. And we were right down here. If you just sort of take a line and drop to the bottom of the page from that dot, you go into this bay. You can see it almost looks like the letter A, that right exactly where you are now. That is called Wilhelmina Bay. And that bay in the wintertime is packed full with krill. There was a study, and I want to make sure I wrote down the numbers because I want to make sure I get it right. But there was a study back in 2009 by Doug Novacek and some of his colleagues, and they found a supergroup of humpback whales in that bay. There were 306 humpbacks in that small area, and they were feeding on krill. And the echo sounder, which we use to obviously find krill often, it was showing krill from the surface down to the seafloor. They were everywhere. And I did with my students, we did another winter back in 2019. That was our first winter. And we caught all the krill we needed for the experiments in Wilhelmina Bay. This last year, when we went down for our winter field season, we went straight to Wilhelmina Bay. And I said to the captain, we're going to find krill here because I know that they'll be here. We spent that whole entire night, 10 hours with the echo sounder on, and we did a sort of zigzag pattern, like a double reverse zigzag up and down both legs of that letter A. We saw not a single thing on the echogram. So there was no krill in there. And
horrible.
Both of these ships plus several others had been, they don't give their exact locations constantly, but I can't prove that they're in Wilhelmina Bay, but there were a whole bunch of them right off Wilhelmina Bay about a week before we passed through. And, it was quite devastating, to be honest. I made a really teary video recording after that first night, which I don't think I'll show to anyone, but it was an incredibly emotional experience. Yeah. I will say we did catch krill the next night. And, when I say what we're catching is nowhere near what obviously the fisheries are taking. We use a small amount and run experiments on them.
Marketing lie.
It is marketing a lie. It's just shocking.
Oh, yeah. No, so I just Googled krill oil, and it's pages and pages of just different companies selling krill oil. Yeah.
It's really
the krill, by their accounting, are free goods. They get a license to go, and they just don't have to pay for what they're extracting. A farmer has to invest quite a lot to get a crop, but taking whether it's fish or squid or krill, they're for zero accounting base until they're killed and put in a package like this.
This was
Right with it.
This was actually as we were arriving in Punta Arenas last year to start our field season. We drove in past one of the fishing vessels, and there was just a truck full. So this was like really close to the window. I just sort of filmed it as we went past. It's the first time I'd actually seen that this is kind of what they end up looking like.
People don't eat krill. It has kind of I have tried it just to know, but they have kind of a metallic, unpleasant taste to human taste buds. But head to salmon or cows or chickens or pigs, it comes out tasting like a salmon or a chicken or a pig. And so groceries for farmed animals captured from wild Antarctic waters should be criminal. We should
I totally agree. because also what really does need that are all the penguin chicks and the whales and the seals, and they're the ones that need the krill. We don't.
The biogeochemical processes that govern climate.
Yes.
I'm going to see if I can
Yes.
get through here to a
Yes.
couple more of these.
Yeah, so this is there have been a lot of efforts through CAMLA to establish marine protected areas. And I was so excited to see the High Seas Treaty being finally going forward, because hopefully, yes.
Protected areas are small compared to the areas open to fishing.
Oh, absolutely. No, I know. And the thing is, they started, so the ones on the Antarctic Peninsula were put forward by Chile and Argentina together. And I believe initially they had much larger areas, but each year they go and they meet the CAMLA Nations representatives meet in October. And I think they've been putting forward this proposal for, I don't know, I want to say 10 years. I might be wrong with that. But each time there's, one nation, at least one nation that doesn't like it. And then so it's sort of gotten smaller and smaller. And yeah, then it gets to a point where we're like, is this even relevant or valuable?
And recently in the news, there were the stories of these krill trawlers just like plowing straight through the big pods of whales, just literally taking the krill from their mouths.
Yeah,
just shocking.
It really is horrifying. And I know I've heard that I've heard from someone who was on one of these ships. Hopefully I'm allowed to say this, probably not, but
anyway, it's okay.
they have had whale bycatch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And apparently they claim that they were dead already. They must have been dead already, but I find it really hard to believe that you would just sort of happenstance collide with a dead whale. Once the whale is dead, it's probably going to sink pretty quickly. I know sometimes they bloat up though, but I mean, so it's either floating at the surface or really fast sinking. And these nets are submerged, like these massive nets that they leave submerged under the water for more than a day, I think, at a time. They're just sort of going, and the nets are open, and a net sort of ends at the pod end, which is the bucket at the end, and that to the end of that is attached a hose that pumps the krill continuously on board the ship. And this is the method that's used for harvesting essential oils, because it keeps the krill in good enough condition. There are other methods where they just do a trawl and bring it up on deck. That's more likely for feed, but yeah,
this is just like the waste byproducts being dumped over,
processed at sea.
So they just bag it up.
Yeah, they have like processing ships for sure, like motherships or whatever you call them. It's horrifying.
This is less horrifying. This is some of your images from this last trip you were on, right?
Oh wow, is it a minke?
Little minke, yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful.
They need the krill. We don't. We need them alive because of their role in climate and their role in protecting creatures like these, the little chin straps.
I love the chin straps. They're so cute. You can actually see the krill stains. That's probably the poop, but
on its little jacket,
Yes.
The messy eater.
Yes.
It's a bib. And of course, up the food chain. And the next is right.
It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. And isn't it so crazy how these leopard seals, the fact that they're such apex predators, will eat krill? I heard that they suck them up between their lips.
I can imagine they're just like,
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. We are going to jump into some questions now. We have a few minutes left. So if you have some...
Oh, I did talk a lot, sorry.
No, not at all. If you have some more questions for us, like pop them into the Q&A box. But Adrian is asking, what is the status of the Antarctic krill population regarding the krill fishery? Is it decreasing, increasing, or stable?
So regarding the krill fishery, I'm assuming that they mean in response maybe to the krill fishery. And it's so hard right now to tease apart the various stresses on the krill population. So there's fishing effort that's increasing, but there's also obviously climate change. And so knowing exactly what is causing changes in the population is hard. but the Atkinson paper that I showed a couple of slides back with the population moving south and kind of shrinking in size, that does show that it is changing. And so the other thing with Antarctic krill living for 5 to 7 years, and their population cycles, so you'll have this sort of boom in abundance, and then the population practically crashes for a couple of years, and then it goes up again and down again. And really, to truly understand a trend in a population like that, you need multiple decades worth of data. And so just to talk on the shorter term, on the space of time that krill the krill fishery has increased, we can't say whether it is stable or not. And that, I mean, that is my scientific opinion on that, because I think we need 50 years worth of data. And the problem is by then it could be ruined. So I feel like I think we should err on the side of caution, really.
Precautionary principle every time.
Yeah.
But there is literally no waste in nature. There's no excess waiting for humans to come and skim off on a continuous basis. We're great disruptors.
We
and
are.
the scale that we're able to extract from the ocean systems now is unprecedented. It's not like when there were 500 million people in the 1500s.
Yeah.
Or in the 1800s, when Antarctic continent was first discovered, when there were 1 billion people.
Yeah.
Or even when I came along in the 2 billion, and then by the 1980s, when krill fishing began to significantly scale up, 4 billion, now we're 8 billion, and things that might seem acceptable when there are only 500 million humans simply cannot be tolerated.
Yeah.
The pressure we put on the wild systems, the technology that we now have to extract on a mega basis, it's like bulldozing rainforests. It's one thing to go after a tree with an axe because you need to build a house or have a mast for a ship 100 years ago. And now we can take down entire ecosystems with a technology. And burn through, as we have, like 90% of the sharks since the 1980s are already gone.
Yeah.
So we know how to kill them. We almost eliminated whales over about 500 years, starting with pretty primitive means, but scaling up. In the 20th century, we killed more whales as technology enabled us to find, capture, and market them. We stopped in 1986. And there are more whales now that we've stopped killing them, which is good news. Imagine if we stopped killing krill.
It would be.
I think like that's so important too, because what you're pointing out about the technological advances, and one of the reasons why the krill fishery has increased so much is because of the improvements in the ships themselves. They're much more capable, and in the fishing techniques, so they can just remove so much. And then with like the improvements in acoustic technology, they can just find they find the krill.
They hunt them. Yeah, they can get every last one.
Yeah, and that is literally the thing. They really can get every last one. And they say that the catch target limit is less than 1% of the total population. Well, most of the fishing is happening in these areas that are incredibly important for krill and for the krill top predators, and they're literally removing everything. And so it's like, you're maybe not removing, the rest of the population, but to these animals that live here, especially the central place foragers, like the penguins that breed on an island, they can't swim to the other side of the Antarctic continent.
No, not at all.
It's
they have to eat local.
No,
there are a couple more questions. Martin is asking, what would the impact of a ship's oil spill do to the krill population?
Oh, that's a great question, Martin. Actually, I don't really know the answer to that, other than the fact that I would imagine it would be incredibly detrimental. I don't think anyone has studied that in particular. There have been not necessarily like the type of oil spills that we know about, like the Exxon Valdez or something like that, but where there have been shipwrecks in Antarctica. So off Palmer Station, there's actually a shipwreck. It's the Bahia Paraiso is the name of the vessel. It was a cruise ship, and it hit ground and sunk. And it was, I want to say, it's probably coming on 30 years ago by now, and it still leaks oil out. And I know that it had a huge impact on the breeding seabirds in that area. I can only imagine that it would have had a massive impact on the Antarctic krill too, because it's going to, it's going to contaminate their food source. It's probably going to clog up their gills. Their gills are external, which makes them different from shrimp, for example.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I can only imagine that it would be really bad for them.
And I know, where, so you went up to look at the Exxon Valdez site, and even today, if you just kind of dig back the cobbles there from the shore, you can still find oil there,
Yeah.
even after all this so-called, cleanup. It's persistent.
Yeah. This question here about
Well,
is there plant-based?
yeah, so
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. So there's one question, we get two more questions now. So April was asking, are there any kind of plant-based substitutes that could be used in place of krill to feed pets with arthritis?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I don't feel like I'm necessarily qualified to answer that, as I'm not a healthcare professional or a vet. But I would say that the krill oil supplements that we, that are sold, and as I say, I don't take those, but the oils in the krill actually come from algae. They come from those diatoms. Like the krill cannot make them themselves, and that's why they need to eat the diatoms. And so I believe that there are ways of having, there are I guess algal brands that you can buy. I don't know enough about veterinary science, obviously, to speak to how it will help your dog, but
Actually, I keep a lookout just because I care. You go to a pharmacy and you see loads of options for fish oil and krill oil and even squid oil and shark oil. And if you look, you can find plant-based.
yeah,
And most of these cultivated plankton systems don't do it in the ocean. They do it in large tanks on the land.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Where you have control, you
Mm.
don't have to worry about the other stuff that goes
Microplastics.
that we put into the ocean that comes back in terms of the fish we eat, or some people eat, I don't, or the squid or the oil. It is the little micro and nanoplastics, of course, but it's all the other stuff that we put into the ocean that you don't want in you.
No.
When it's cultivated under controlled circumstances, you can bet that all these, that it's a lot safer for
Yeah,
consume
Yeah.
than
actually,
something
something
in the wild ocean that is just washed with
So there-
things you don't want in you.
Yeah, so there, those oils, they can come from, algae, flaxseed, nuts, all kinds of different ways
That's right.
that come from plant-based walnuts, but all those kinds of plant-based
Yeah,
oils can really,
you can
fill
find
that.
You just have to look for it.
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess early humans could only get that, like the EPA DHA combination, from those cold water fish, because early humans weren't eating phytoplankton. But if we can cultivate it, and with the technologies we have, provide it directly to humans, I feel like that is
Yeah.
yeah, why not? And what Sylvia was saying too is it's so true. People think of Antarctica as being completely isolated and untouched, but there's pollution there. I mean, it's
During our recent expedition just a couple of weeks ago, we sampled every place we went along the peninsula, the notable place for krill, and we found micro and nanoplastics in every single sample that we took.
oh my gosh, did you? Wow.
Shallow, mid-range, and deep, with fine
Wow.
measurements, and we came up with, you wouldn't think. And I've seen the krill oil advertisements. It's a pure,
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, it's not pure. And also the, krill only have high amounts of those fatty acids if they're eating diatoms, and along the Antarctic Peninsula, the diatoms are decreasing, or dinoflagellates. But, the thing is, like, warming and climate change is going to affect the quality of krill and the lipids in them. And so why not shift to a more sustainable source?
Right.
And cultivating quality.
All right, we're going to slide in one last question. It's going to be a really quick answer though.
Okay.
Adrian is asking, can transshipment be supervised and limited according to the Kalmar rules? So it'd be a way to limit the export of krill from the area?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the Camelot rules in that regard for sure. I don't think I'm probably the best person to answer that. I'm sorry, Adrian.
All right, and he's also asking, do you accept MS candidates in your lab?
I will be probably next year, not this year, because I'll be in Antarctica when the new students start. But yeah, reach out to me.
Right.
But can I add one thing? Sorry.
Okay. I'll allow.
So Camelot, one of the reasons why it's so hard to get things passed through Camelot or new policies is because it's by full consensus. Every decision there has to be full consensus, and so I think that's one of the challenges, and one of the things I loved about the new UN High Seas Treaty is there was 196 nations. Am I right? I mean,
yeah.
That's a really positive thing that so many nations came together in agreement with that.
Let's see what we can do to get them to all agree to do it faster.
We need to sign.
Yes.
Not by 2030, but let's start now and get another 30% by 2030 . So
that would be amazing.
Gauntlet. Come on, countries, let's go.
Yes. Yeah. We challenge you.
Yeah, we challenge you. So before we go, we want to say thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. And thank you, Ocean Elders, and mostly thank you to all of our community that shows up every time and joins us in these wonderful conversations. We love it when you just dive in and participate with us. We're grateful to you all. We're going to be back on March 28th. We're going to be talking with Franz Lanting and Chris Engstrom. And
Oh, nice.
I know, right? Remember to take care of the ocean.
As if your life depends on it.
Because
it does.
It does. Thank you again. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.